Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 120b, top of the page. With the word Zeh HaDavar, Derashei HaMatos, Hachinami Delo Yehe Noegel Lebedol Zeh, Amar Leyahu Yali Zeh, Zeh Mihasam. Razuti asked from Ashi about another instance of the same phrase. In the case of, this is the matter written with regard to the heads of the tribes, in the introductory verse to the halachot of vows, when Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the children of Israel, saying, this is the matter that the Lord has commanded. Numbers 30, verse 2. Is it also the case that the halachot of vows will not be practiced except in this generation? Rav Ashi said to him, the halachot in that case, that of vows is derived through a verbal analogy between the word this stated here and the verse discussing vows and the word this stated there in the verse discussing offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple, which is applicable in all generations. Hai nami le'lev zeh zeh mihasam hai mai b'shloma hasam yitzrich l'gzira shava achal ma yitzrich l'shtok kravine v'ana yadana d'odorothu. The Gemara asks, this halacha concerning the daughter inheriting her father's portion, let it be derived through a verbal analogy between the word this stated here with regard to inheritance and the word this stated there in the verse discussing offerings as well. The Gemara rejects that comparison. What is this suggestion granted there, meaning with regard to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple? And with regard to vows, the phrase, this is the matter, was necessary for deriving other halachot through a verbal analogy. As will be explained later, therefore the term may also be employed to teach that the halacha applies in all generations. But here, with regard to a daughter's inheritance, for what other halacha was this phrase necessary? If the halacha truly applies for posterity, let the verse be silent and refrain from addressing when this halacha applies, not by stating, this is the matter, and I would know that it is for all generations, as is the case with all other mitzvot. Mitzvot Ma'ik Zeh Shava de Tanya, Nemar Kan Zeh HaDavar, V'Nemar Lahalan Zeh HaDavar, Ma'alehan Aharon Uvanav V'Chol Yisrael, Afkan Aharon Uvanav V'Chol Yisrael, U'Makan Roshei HaMatos, Af Lahalan Roshei HaMatos. The Gemara explains what is the verbal analogy for which the phrase was necessary as it is taught in Braita. It is stated here with regard to vows, this is the matter, and it is stated there with regard to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple, this is the matter. Just as there the mitzvah applies to Aaron and his sons and all Israel, so too here with regard to vows, the mitzvah applies to Aaron and his sons and all Israel. And just as here the mitzvah applies to the heads of the tribes, as explicitly stated in the verse cited above, so too there, with regard to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple, there is particular relevance to the heads of the tribes. Amar Mar Malehalan Aron Ibanav V'Chol Yisrael Afkan Aron Ibanav V'Chol Yisrael Mahim Chasa Amar Racha Bar Yaakov Lo Imar Shehaforos Nidorim V'Shloish Shehen Yoitos. The Gemara analyzes the cited brisa. Master says, just as there with regard to offerings, the mitzvah applies to Aaron and his sons and all Israel, so to here with regard to vows, the mitzvah applies to Aaron and his sons and all Israel. The Gemara asks, with regard to what halacha is this verbal analogy stated? Racha Bar Yaakov says, this is written to say that the dissolution of vows can be performed by 3 laymen with no particular expertise in the halacha of vows. Just as the prohibition of offering slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple applies to all the Jewish people, including laymen. The Gemara objects, but the phrase "the heads of tribes" is written explicitly in the portion of the vows, indicating that the matter is not entrusted to laymen. The Gemara answers, it is as Rav Chisda says, or Yochanan says, in a different context. The mention of the heads of tribes teaches that vows may be dissolved by a single expert halachic authority. So too here, this phrase teaches that vows can be nullified by a single expert halachic authority. The Gemara analyzes the next clause on the side of Brighton, just as here the mitzvah applies to the heads of the tribes, so too there, with regard to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple, there is particular relevance to the heads of the tribes. The Gemara asks, with regard to what halacha are the heads of the tribes linked to the prohibition of slaughtering offerings outside the tabernacle or temple, or Sheshet says, this is written to say that there is a concept of requesting dissolution of consecration of consecrated property, just as one can request dissolution of a vow. It's not Beis Shammai. Why would it be hektish toys? Hektish. We still are in hektish. Harei zeh my avid lay. The Gemara asks, and according to Beit Shammai, who say that there is no possibility of requesting that a halachic authority dissolve the consecrated property, this cannot explain the connection of the heads of the tribes to offerings, tribes to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple, as we learned in the Mishnah in Nazir 30b. Beit Shammai say consecration that when performed in error is nevertheless effective as consecration, because one's mindset does not supersede his verbal declaration. And Beit Hillel say this is not consecration. Accordingly, in the opinion of Beit Shammai, what do they do with this seemingly analogous usage of this and this in the portions of offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple and vows, respectively? Yesh davar d'shchut dechutz yiboyle al shachadu chayev ve'eno chayev al hamolek zeh davar d'shvatos yiboyle l'chacham matir ve'en bal matir bal mefer ve'en chacham mefer. Okay, the Gemara answers Beit Shammai required this is the matter written of offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle or temple to teach that for the act of slaughtering he is liable to receive excision from the world to come, karet. But he is not liable to receive karet for the act of pinching the neck of a consecrated bird outside the tabernacle or temple, which is excluded from the category of slaughtering in this mitzvah. And Beit Shammai require this is the matter written of the heads of the tribes in the portion about vows to teach that only a halachic authority can dissolve vows, but a husband cannot dissolve them. The halachic authority can dissolve the vow for a petitioner, but a woman's husband or father cannot dissolve her vow. And conversely, a husband can nullify his wife's or his daughter's vows on the day that he hears the vow, regardless of her mindset, but a halachic authority cannot nullify a vow in this manner. Will Beit Shammai's list lahu gzera afaras yidar mishloishe yoites benalo afkalahu b'netanya vaydavar Moshe's ba'alei shem el b'nei Yisrael. Rav Yosef Yomer. The Gemara asks, but according to Beit Shammai, who do not have this verbal analogy, meaning that they do not recognize as authoritative the verbal analogy that links vows to offerings slaughtered outside the tabernacle and temple, from where do they derive that dissolution of vows can be performed by three laymen? The Gemara answers Beit Shammai derive it from that which is taught in a Batra. The verse states at the end of a passage relating to the halachot of the festivals, and Moses declared to the children of Israel the appointed seasons of the Lord. Leviticus 23:44. In explaining the verse, Rav Yosef says,